She kept receipts.
You know what they say about Southern women and revenge? We bury our secrets deeper than our husbands and serve them colder than a Charleston debutante's smile. Margaret Beaumont didn't just burn down the retail empire that bled her dry for 19 years. She torched it with the very algorithms they thought belonged to them, then sold the ashes to their competitors while their stock price flatlined like a heart monitor at Roper Hospital. They thought they were eliminating an expensive liability when they pushed out a 52-year-old project manager who knew where all the bodies were buried in their books. What they didn't know was that Maggie had been documenting every dirty deal, every cooked book, every stolen idea since Obama's second term, and she'd just finished building the weapon that would make their $100 million company beg for mercy from a woman they'd dismissed with a form letter and a fruit basket. By the time the FBI raids started and the handcuffs clicked on King Street, everyone in Charleston would know the truth. Hell hath no fury like a Southern woman with receipts, patents, and the passwords to everything. Picture this right now. You might be listening while shopping on King Street, or maybe sitting in traffic on Calhoun after hitting Trader Joe's. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're tuning in from, because what happened at Rutledge & Company this year proves that sometimes a Southern woman's revenge comes wrapped in supply chain data and tied with a bow of perfectly documented intellectual property. Margaret Maggie Beaumont was the kind of woman who answered emails at 4 a.m. and solved crisis calls during her vacation for 19 years straight. She was the one who saved the company when their entire inventory system crashed during Black Friday 2019. She single-handedly coordinated the pivot to curbside pickup in March 2020 when everyone else was still arguing about whether COVID was just the flu. She built the partnerships with local Charleston vendors that turned Rutledge from a regional chain into a Southern luxury powerhouse. She worked through her mother's dementia diagnosis, through her husband leaving her for his CrossFit instructor, through Hurricane Ian flooding her first floor in 2022. While the junior managers were making TikToks about quiet quitting and lazy girl jobs, Maggie was rebuilding supply chains that the Port of Charleston strike had destroyed, keeping 43 stores profitable when everyone else was closing locations. The pattern of exploitation started her first year. In 2005, her revolutionary inventory prediction model, which anticipated customer needs based on local events, weather patterns, and social media trends, cut waste by 30%. The company newsletter credited it to innovative team leadership. In 2010, her idea to partner with Charleston Fashion Week turned Rutledge into the premier Southern luxury destination, but somehow the CEO's nephew, who'd been hungover during the actual negotiations, got promoted to Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. By 2018, when she created the Southern Charm collection that partnered with local artisans from the Charleston City Market, generating $12 million in revenue, the company's annual report mentioned it as a Rutledge family initiative. Maggie had stopped fighting for credit and started building something else entirely. Let me tell you about a Tuesday in June 2024, right after Rutledge announced record profits for Q2. The temperature outside hit 97 degrees, the kind of thick Charleston heat that makes walking down Broad Street feel like swimming through sweet tea. The termination meeting lasted exactly 11 minutes. They called it a strategic realignment for the post-inflation consumer landscape. The 33-year-old chief strategy officer, Preston Rutledge, yes, the founder's grandson who'd joined straight from Wharton, sat across from her in the executive conference room overlooking Marion Square, the same room where she'd saved their asses 47 times. HR flanked him with paperwork that looked like it was printed from a template they'd bought on Etsy. The company needs fresh perspectives on modern retail dynamics, Preston said, his voice doing that consultant uptalk that made everything sound theoretical. We're pivoting toward a more digitally integrated AI-driven approach. Maggie almost laughed. She'd been using predictive analytics since Preston was still playing beer pong at Penn. Your severance package is generous, HR added, sliding papers across the mahogany table that Maggie had sourced from a Savannah antique dealer in 2011. 3 months, continuation of health benefits through August, and of course, your non-compete agreement remains binding. Maggie smiled. She signed what she needed to sign. She didn't sign what looked different from her original contract. They were so busy congratulating themselves on cutting a $200,000 salary, they didn't notice. But here's what those Wharton boys never learned about Southern women who grew up poor in Somerville. We keep receipts longer than we keep grudges. 3 years ago, after watching what happened to Marcus Chen, Maggie had started her real work in the converted garage of her James Island home. Marcus, brilliant, kind Marcus, who'd developed a revolutionary approach to sustainable retail logistics. Marcus, who'd trusted the company process, shared his innovations freely, then watched his name disappear from the implementation like morning fog over the Ashley River. The diagnosis came during the 2021 supply chain crisis. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. Marcus called Maggie from MUSC's oncology ward. "I need you to learn from my stupidity," he said, his voice steady despite the morphine drip. "Document everything outside their servers. File nothing through their lawyers. And Maggie," his voice cracked, "don't let them bury you like they buried me." They'd worked together for 11 years, sharing gas station coffee during inventory nights, their fingers occasionally touching over spreadsheets, building something between them that neither quite named. He died 6 months later, 2 days after Biden's inauguration, but not before leaving her something in a safety deposit box at South State Bank. Not money, not jewelry, a hard drive with 15 years of emails, recordings, and evidence, and a note that said, "For when they try to erase you, too." Maggie's side project, what she built while Rutledge executives were arguing about whether to invest in NFTs, was revolutionary. She called it the Beaumont Predictive Commerce System, an AI-driven platform that could predict customer needs 3 months out with 94% accuracy, automatically adjust inventory across locations, and create personalized shopping experiences that increased customer lifetime value by 300%. She'd tested it secretly using public data from competing retailers, refined it through the ChatGPT revolution, and filed the patents using her grandmother's maiden name. She paid the lawyer with money from selling her engagement ring on Facebook Marketplace. Every receipt, every timestamp, every iteration was documented like evidence in a murder trial, which, professionally speaking, it was about to be. 3 days after her termination, Maggie met Sarah Kim, CEO of Compass Retail Group, at Fleet Landing Restaurant. The lunch crowd was thick with tourists who'd just gotten off cruise ships, but their corner table overlooked the Ravenel Bridge, and the noise gave them privacy. Sarah didn't waste time with small talk. "I heard Rutledge just cut loose the only person who actually understands why their southern expansion worked," she said, stabbing at her shrimp and grits. "I also heard you've been developing something that makes their entire system look like a Radio Shack inventory log." Maggie slid an iPad across the table. Not her Rutledge work, her real work. Sarah's eyes widened as she scrolled. "If we do this," Sarah said, "we announce it during their earnings call. We make sure every vendor, every investor, every competitor knows exactly whose brain they just threw away." The contract terms were everything Rutledge had never offered. Equity stake, name recognition, and the title Chief Innovation Officer, with her name on the door. Let me tell you about what Maggie did that night. She called James Rutledge Jr., the founder's son who'd been pushed aside when his father brought in grandson Preston. They met at the Ordinary on Upper King Street, away from the Broad Street power lunch crowd. "James," she said over oysters and muscadet, "I know you're tired of watching Preston destroy what your father built." The silence lasted through 3 blue points. Then, "What do you need?" What she needed was simple. For him to be in the office the morning her announcement went live. To watch faces. To be her witness. What she didn't expect was what he said next. "Preston's been cooking the books. Inflating inventory values, hiding shrinkage, I have documents." He slid her a flash drive hidden in a high-cotton matchbox. "For what it's worth, I voted against firing you. So did half the board. Preston and my father overruled us." Monday, 6:30 a.m., the news hit every retail trade publication and the Post and Courier business section simultaneously. Compass Retail Group acquires exclusive rights to Beaumont Predictive Commerce System. Margaret Beaumont named Chief Innovation Officer. The release detailed the patented system, named Maggie as sole inventor, and included a neutron bomb. Compass had already secured partnerships with 7 major Southern brands who'd been waiting for the right technology partner. The kicker? They'd just signed a lease for the old Belk building on King Street, right across from Rutledge's flagship store. By 7:15, Maggie's phone lit up with texts from former colleagues. The executive floor at Rutledge was apparently in full meltdown mode. Preston had thrown his phone. The founder had emerged from his Bay Street mansion for the first time since the Masters tournament. Where are you listening from right now? Maybe you're in your car on I-26 or at Shem Creek watching the shrimp boats come in. Drop your location in the comments, because what happened next could happen in any company where they think experience is expendable. The Rutledge War Room convened at 7:45 a.m. in their Meeting Street headquarters. William Rutledge himself, 81 years old and mean as a cornered cottonmouth, stormed in wearing his seersucker suit despite the July heat. Preston fumbled through explanations while the CFO calculated potential losses on her phone calculator. The fancy software had somehow stopped working that morning. The legal team spoke in fragments. Non-compete, but she filed independently. Trade secrets, but the timestamps. Someone mentioned Maggie's little hobby project, and James Jr. actually laughed out loud. "Hobby project?" he said, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. "Louis Vuitton just called. They're pulling their boutique from our stores unless we can match Compass's predictive capabilities. That hobby is about to cost us $40 million in exclusive contracts." Maggie spent that morning not gloating, but building. She met with her new team, 5 managers who'd followed her from Rutledge, and 4 young analysts who'd been waiting for someone to actually mentor them instead of using them as Excel robots. "Here's how we work," she said, standing in the sun-filled space that would become their headquarters. "Every innovation gets properly credited. Every idea gets its creator's name. And every single one of you will learn this system inside out, because hoarding knowledge is how companies die." Someone asked about Rutledge's potential lawsuit. Maggie pulled out a binder 4 inches thick. "Let them try. I have receipts for every software purchase, timestamps on every development session, and—" She paused for effect. "Recordings of every meeting where they discussed transitioning out expensive overhead." The room went silent. "Yes, South Carolina is a one-party consent state. Yes, it's all legal. No, I'm not proud of it, but I'm not sorry either." By Wednesday, Rutledge's legal team had crafted their first threatening letter. It was a masterpiece of corporate desperation and creative legal interpretation. Misappropriation of proprietary methods, despite Maggie developing everything at home. Violation of fiduciary duty, though they'd terminated her. Tortious interference with business relationships, which was almost funny considering they'd been taking credit for her vendor relationships for 2 decades. Maggie's lawyer, Patricia Cheng, recommended by Marcus in that safety deposit box note, responded with a symphony of evidence, dated notebooks, GitHub commits from her personal account, receipts from Best Buy for the hardware she'd used to build her testing environment, and then the atomic bomb, an email chain from 2 years prior where Preston explicitly stated that Beaumont's after-hours coding projects were not aligned with company priorities and should remain her personal pursuit. Their own words became her shield. The story that broke in the Charleston City paper that Friday had a headline that made Maggie's phone explode with notifications. "Retail Revolution: How Charleston's oldest luxury chain lost everything to the woman they threw away." The journalist had done her homework, interviewed dozens of former employees, traced the pattern. It wasn't just Maggie. It was Jennifer Thompson, let go at 49 after creating their entire customer service framework. It was Linda Chen, Marcus's sister, who'd left after her brother's contributions were erased. It was 15 years of brilliant women pushed out while their innovations were absorbed into the Rutledge family legacy. The article noted that Rutledge stock had dropped 18% since Monday. Compass, still private, was fielding investor calls every hour. But here's the twist nobody saw coming, not even Maggie. Saturday morning, as she walked her dog along the Battery, Preston Rutledge called her directly, not lawyers, not through intermediaries. Him. His voice sounded like he'd aged 10 years in 10 days. "I need your help," he said, and the desperation was real. My grandfather is going to destroy me. There are irregularities in the books, inventory that doesn't exist, vendor payments for goods never delivered. I know I deserve whatever comes, but my kids don't deserve to watch their father go to federal prison. Maggie let the silence stretch while she watched dolphins play in the harbor. Why would I help you? She finally asked. Because, Preston said, I have recordings too. Of my grandfather, of the board, of what they did to Marcus Chen. The meeting happened at Waterfront Park, under the pineapple fountain that had become Charleston's symbol of hospitality, ironic given the circumstances. Preston looked like he'd discovered what actual work felt like for the first time. He handed her a flash drive disguised as a BMW key fob. Everything's on here, including the real reason they pushed Marcus out. He'd discovered the company was inflating inventory values for loan collateral, claiming merchandise that didn't exist. He was going to report it to the SEC. They destroyed him first. Maggie felt her chest tighten, remembering Marcus's final weeks, how he'd insisted on documenting everything even while the chemo ravaged him. What do you want? She asked. Preston's answer surprised her. I want out. I want to testify. And I want you to know that I voted against your termination. The recording of that board meeting is on there too. My grandfather overruled everyone. Maggie took the flash drive to Patricia Cheng, who took it to the FBI, who suddenly became very interested in Rutledge and Company's books. The investigation would later reveal 20 years of systematic fraud, inflated valuations that had secured hundreds of millions in loans. But Maggie had a different plan for the information. She called William Rutledge directly. Let's discuss a license agreement, she said. One that keeps your company alive while ensuring justice for everyone you've wronged. The terms she proposed were brutal but not fatal. Rutledge would license her system at premium rates, publicly acknowledge her innovation, establish a fund for employees whose contributions had been minimized or erased, starting with Marcus Chen's estate, and the entire C-suite would step down within 6 months. Or, she added, we can let the federal investigation run its course. Orange isn't really your color, William. The signing happened in the same conference room where they'd terminated her. William Rutledge's hand shook as he signed, his Mont Blanc pen scratching across paper that would cost him millions but save him from prison. Preston was already gone, cooperating with authorities in exchange for immunity, living in a one-bedroom apartment near Colonial Lake. James Jr. would take over the company with a mandate to rebuild it ethically. The first check from the Marcus Chen Innovation Fund went to his sister Linda, who cried when Maggie handed it to her at Kudu Coffee on Vanderhorst. He loved you, you know, Linda said, stirring her lavender latte. He was just waiting for the right time to tell you. Maggie nodded. She knew. She'd found the letter in the safety deposit box, the one that started with "My dearest Maggie" and ended with "Build something beautiful where I couldn't." 6 months later, on New Year's Eve, 2024, as Charleston prepared to ring in 2025 with fireworks over the harbor, Maggie stood at a podium in the Charleston Place Hotel ballroom, addressing 500 retail executives at the National Retail Federation Gala. She wore the same black dress she'd worn to her termination meeting, but now it meant something different. Behind her, a screen showed the faces of 43 women over 40 who'd been strategically realigned out of retail leadership in the past 5 years. They tell you to lean in, she said, her voice carrying the weight of every late night, every stolen idea, every time she'd been called sweetie in a boardroom. I say lean back and build something they can't steal. Document everything, file your patents, keep your receipts, and when they try to erase you... She paused, looking directly at William Rutledge in the third row, slumped in his wheelchair. Make sure you've already written yourself into tomorrow's code. The standing ovation lasted 6 minutes, but the moment that mattered came after, when a woman approached her, clutching a notebook covered in coffee stains and post-it notes. I'm 48, she said. Walmart just told me I'm being replaced by someone more aligned with digital transformation. I've been building something in my spare time. What do I do? Maggie handed her Patricia Cheng's business card and her own. First, you document, then you build, then you win. And if you're listening to this from anywhere, your car in Mount Pleasant, your office in North Charleston, your kitchen in Goose Creek, remember this. They can take your job. They can't take your genius. That lives in your code, in your systems, in the notebooks they never thought to check. The integration of the Beaumont system transformed not just Compass, but the entire retail landscape. By the time Taylor Swift's Eras Tour hit Miami in October, retailers using Maggie's system had predicted and capitalized on every merchandise trend, from friendship bracelets to sequined everything. The system had anticipated the Stanley Cup craze, the revival of coastal grandmother aesthetic, and even the pickle jar trend on TikTok. Compass opened 12 new locations across the Southeast, each one staffed by managers Maggie had personally recruited from the over 40 and overlooked talent pool. She instituted Innovation Fridays, where any employee could present ideas without fear of them being stolen. She started a mentorship program for women in retail over 40. She named it the Marcus Chen Initiative, because the best tributes are the ones that keep growing. A year later, Rutledge and Company filed for bankruptcy. The fraud investigation had revealed decades of malfeasance, phantom inventory worth hundreds of millions. But from its ashes, James Jr. built something smaller and cleaner. Chen and Associates Retail Consulting, named for Marcus, dedicated to ethical retail innovation. He hired Linda Chen as lead consultant. Maggie consulted for them occasionally, because revenge isn't the opposite of grace. Sometimes it's just grace with better lawyers and GitHub commits. The night Maggie was named Retail Executive of the Year by the National Retail Federation, the first woman over 50 to receive it, she stood on her balcony overlooking Charleston Harbor, holding the crystal award that caught the light from the Ravenel Bridge. She thought about Marcus, about the late nights they'd never share again, about the love they'd kept professional when it wanted to be so much more. She thought about Preston, testifying in federal court, his Vineyard Vines ties replaced with a suit from Target. She thought about William Rutledge, under house arrest in his South of Broad mansion, his empire reduced to cautionary tales in business schools. But mostly, she thought about tomorrow's code on her laptop, a new system that would democratize retail technology for small businesses, making it accessible to every woman with a dream and a laptop. Because here's what nobody tells you about revenge. It's not about destroying what hurt you. It's about building something so undeniably yours that everyone who doubted you becomes a bug in your code, annoying but fixable. It's about taking the fragments of what they broke and debugging them into something they could never have imagined because they never really saw your potential in the first place. So if you're listening to this from your office where they've just called you too expensive to retain, from your car after another meeting where your solution became someone else's promotion, from your kitchen table where your coding dreams they said were too ambitious for someone your age, know this. Document everything. Build in secret if you have to. File your patents. Keep your receipts. Screenshot every email. Find your Patricia Cheng. Trust your instincts when they tell you something's wrong. And when the moment comes, not if, when, to show them what you've really been creating, don't whisper. Don't shout. Just let the code run with your name commented clearly in every function. The last time Maggie visited Marcus's grave at Magnolia Cemetery, she brought her laptop. Not to show him, wherever he was he already knew, but to run the system one time in his honor, watching as it predicted with perfect accuracy what Charleston would want tomorrow. As she walked back through the historic headstones, her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. I'm 54. Just got strategically realigned out of Amazon, and I've been building something revolutionary in my spare bedroom. Can we talk? Maggie smiled and typed back, yes. And bring your receipts. That's how revolutions really start. Not with viral LinkedIn posts or Twitter threads about hustle culture, but with women who refuse to let their brilliance be absorbed into someone else's quarterly earnings. Women who know that the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with documentation, patents, and the kind of success that requires the company that fired you to pay licensing fees just to stay competitive. Drop a comment about where you're listening from, and if you've ever had your own document everything moment. Because somewhere out there, another Maggie is taking notes, filing patents, and building tomorrow while they're still trying to justify yesterday's termination. And that, my friends, is how you win a war they didn't even know they'd started. The best revenge is massive success with receipts, and a Southern woman who knows how to use both.